approach to all of this. It seems to me that you dismiss agency. Who's going to bring about change? Is it going to be brought about in the pages of the FT, in the op-ed pages, or is it going to be brought about by social movements and people making demands? And I think it's been the fear of what in America is called pitchforks. People getting, enraged by all of this that has led to any of the financial reform talk that we've seen. So is it so wrong for people to look at all of this and get very furious about it and want to do something about it?
Karel, I want a 30-second answer on this. Sorry, I'm the doom and gloomer.
30 seconds, really. Collusion, yes, because there were irresponsible lending practices on mortgages and credit cards, which people were going to abuse, and everybody knew they were going to abuse, because that was exploiting human nature. But not collusion in the sense that the world is full of people who, in senior financial positions and in senior politics, who honestly believe they're doing it for the best. And unless you come to terms with the sincerity of Gordon Brown, you can't understand the world. That the central problem is these elites who think they are well-meaning.
So why not a jail out instead of a bailout?
Okay, guys, don't forget it, Danny. You're on the panel, too, and I'm going to get our audience back here now, please. Steve, at last, let's go.
Sure, I'm really glad that this presentation brought politics in, because I think that's one of the things I felt was a little bit missing from the earlier discussion, because it's not, the context has to be not just what do journalists do, but what other actors who are perhaps more powerful, regulators and particularly politicians, were doing. And the interesting thing in Karel's presentation I want to raise is, I mean, you talk about New Labour buying into this story, but I mean, that was in a sense the heart of what New Labour was. Moving into the center and embracing the city and light regulation was a key part of their whole proposition to the electorate, now slightly tarnished, obviously. So the question really is, is it the technocrats or the journalists are going to change the narrative? Is it going to be the political process and the politicians essentially, or the reaction to the decision of the politicians that's going to have to change the narrative? And in that regard, I mean, the other issue about who's to blame, I mean, ultimately, one of the things that seems to be restricting change is that although a lot of people start out by blaming the bankers, in the end, it looks like people mistrust the government almost as much, or perhaps more, than they mistrust the financial system. So if you mistrust the government and don't believe it can change anything, then it's very hard to build a narrative saying, the response to this should be to reform the whole system and get the government to do something better or stronger about it.
Now, who do you want to particularly address that?
I think particularly first to Karel, but perhaps some of the panelists as well.
Okay. Another 30 seconds, Karel.
My general line would be that politicians don't originate narratives, they disseminate narratives. Every frontline politician I've ever known has to be somewhere else within 15 minutes. And the night before, he sits down with his aides and says, now, tell me what the fuck I think about this. And that's part of the condition of politics. And some do it more gracefully, like Obama, but that's what politicians are like. So I don't think it's really up to the academics, the journalists, and the technocrats to sort out a better story.
Okay, our panel.
Well, I was just going to say, it's a panel of journalists about journalism, and we should worry about what we can do. It's about what we're going to go in and we journalists are going to will go in and appropriately find fault with academics, politicians, etc. But there's a time for reflection on where we fit in and how we. I really think that the whole storytelling concept really is brilliant and beautiful and helpful, because I focus on a narrow type of thing, but it is about the conversation. It is about the framing, and you can't say that we don't participate in that. We certainly do.
Did you want to come in there, Bob? Yes.
Yeah, just
sorry, nodding.
How much of this is a question more than anything else? I mean, in the U.S., as reform sort of petered out after a weak start, it became even weaker. It was running up against 10% unemployment. It was running up against a sense that maybe you don't mess around with things because things are bad enough, and there's a mass public out there that could turn on you as easily as turn on the bankers. How much does that play in framing this narrative?
If you put that consideration together, Bob, which I agree with, and the inherent shallowness of mass politicians,
Right.
it's quite a frightening world. But it seems to me that, you know, as journalists and as academics, we are responsible both for standing back and thinking about the framing and for telling a story. And I think all of us, you know, I'm sorry if Chris thought that was an attack on breaking news.
No, I get what you were saying. I get what you were
Of
saying.
which I am,
Yeah.
you know, an enthusiastic reader, or was until the Wall Street Journal stopped carrying it.
Oh, you can get us elsewhere.
The key thing, it seems to me, if you take that responsibility, it's not simply a question of, you know, the liberal journalism school. We're all of us responsible one way or another for trying to get a story together and trying to put bits of that story out into the public. I'd agree with that.
We've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to fit in 3 questions, believe it or not, make it very quick.
Yeah. Question to Dean is, because first you were asked about who reported correctly on the coming crisis, and Bloomberg was about the only one that came to your mind. I was wondering how much are you also, because I should introduce myself, I'm Tony Straka, I'm writing the Prudent Investor blog, yeah? And I would also have a big problem to list only 10 old media companies, yeah, that have correctly forecasted the crisis, but in my blog roll you will find some 60 bloggers who have all been coming this seeing since 2004. Are you taking watch of them as well, and if not, why? Thank you.
Yeah, and the answer is no, we didn't take them into account, and the reason was this. We were talking about the issue was to what degree was the public warned of what was happening in the financial system, and it wasn't simply a practical problem of reading every blog. That wasn't the issue. It was really that, for better or for worse, these are our influence makers and the agenda setters, and that's the and blogs are you know, no need to downplay their importance or their usefulness or their intelligence or whatever, but if the public opinion is going to have any hope of engaging on these issues, it's going to have to come from the mainstream media.
Mark, can I just ask you on that? Are you watching the blogs out there now?
No,
No?
no. You get what you pay for, and they're free.
Uh-huh. So is there a danger that, you know, there's some credibility within them, but then again, there may be a few others who
I was
shouldn't
just
be
going to add
having
also,
access?
and I am not a student of them, but, and I do read them today, you know, handful, but it seems to me that they're much more important today. You might take them into account today than you would in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6. So anyway, I also add that.
Danny?
Well, I'm a blogger myself, and part of what I do is cite what's in other blogs. Naked Capitalism for one, BaselineScenario.com for others. I find information and analysis about banking, financial reform, and the banking situation that I do not find, alas, in Breaking Views, and do not find in the New York Times and Washington Post. So I think we have a duty to reach out to other sources of information. If you say that the media system has failed, why not, you know, open yourself up to some alternatives that haven't?
I don't think the media system has failed, though. That's not a proven proposition.
And the danger to a blog, so you guys are the good guys, but there is a big danger that there's a lot of people out there who can spin a story that will get completely out of control by just getting their point across. Sorry, you've got a question. Damien, sorry.
Damien Tambini, London School of Economics. Not a proven proposition. Obviously, looking into the past and identifying individual instances of spotting the story is one way of doing it, and it's a very comforting one. But of course, there's another way of doing it, which would be to say, as Dean has done, looking into the past and saying, in the total volume of stories, where was this story, and did it make the move from the business pages to the front pages? I don't think we're going to resolve that one. But I think in some of the recent comments, it's beginning to make me wonder if financial journalism exists. And I'll say why. I'd be very interested in the different panelists responding to a question about something which is behind the discussion, which is the notion of responsibilities and the idea that